Ever since I was a little kid, I knew that I needed to be an artist. It was something I knew that I inherently am. Many artists like myself are just barely getting by. We do this because we love it, because there's nothing else. And to have the results of our passion used against us and to replace us and displace us is astounding.
The first time I used generative AI, it was just kind of really crazy to me, like surprising. I didn't really know what to expect, so I just went down a really deep rabbit hole, like immediately, just seeing what kind of images it could make and everything that I could think of.
You can explore a range of different spaces, exploration, camera angles, characters that perhaps you never thought you could do before. They can explore all those infinite spaces in just a few seconds. And I think that's magical. That's something we've never had the chance of doing before.
It really depends on who you ask, whether or not generative AI is going to totally supplant people that are currently making images, videos, films, things like that, or if it's just going to be another, say, tool in a toolbox.
AI making art is not what we really wanted. Like, we wanted AI to take away drudgery, like having to do the dishes, so that we could make more art ourselves.
AI has changed a lot over the years, but in the last few years in particular, it's changed so much. When people think about AI today, they often are talking about generative AI. Over a number of years, companies and individuals have improved generative AI systems so that they can produce images and videos, music as well. It's taken a long time to get here, but at this point, it's getting harder and harder to distinguish what is made by people from what is made by a computer.
Runway is a generative AI startup based in New York City. Cristobal Valenzuela and his co-founders started the company in 2018, looking for a way to build a new AI tailored for filmmakers.
I think this technology, when applied to filmmaking and art and design and all sorts of creative disciplines, provides an entirely new way of making things. And it's really important that the way we do it is with an artistic mindset. We develop these models with the best possible framework to make them really usable in the context of creative endeavors like filmmaking.
I use Runway in my workflow by trying to combine it with things that I draw and just use Runway to basically make it move and, add camera movements or bring certain environments to life. Like, I really like to incorporate the human touch in a lot of what I do, so often I'll illustrate a creature or a character and then I'll try and put them in an environment, and then from there we use Runway to basically just play with it and move things around.
So imagine I want to tell a story. And I'm still undecided on which world I want this story to happen. I think it would be great if I can basically do I want to be now an astronaut, and I'm suddenly becoming an astronaut, and I can look around and I'm in space, or maybe I'm an alien, I'm from another planet, and I'm transforming myself into that character. Maybe I'm just a different person from a different era, and I can also see how I can use this to tell that story.
While some artists have embraced Gen AIs like Runway to create or assist in their workflow, the practice remains controversial for a number of reasons.
We've seen a lot of problems arise in the current generative AI boom. A lot of people have questions about where training data comes from in order to train generative AI models. The real issue with intellectual property and generative AI is that all of the principles in intellectual property law say that if you create something, then you own it. It is your intellectual property. And generative AI companies have, largely ignored this long-standing legal guideline and have taken people's intellectual property, used it to train their models without consent and without paying for that privilege. And often the developers themselves don't know what's in these large data sets because they're just grabbing large data sets off of the internet. There are just a lot of places online where there are huge amounts of data hanging out. And you just collect all of them, and there you go. You've got a huge training data set.
Right now, it's still largely the wild, wild west when it comes to training data for AI systems. There are some things that artists can do if they don't want to be included in training data. For instance, they can use a program like Nightshade, which can sort of scramble their images in a sense when it comes to the training process. They can also try to opt out. Some companies are offering people a chance to do that. But these processes tend to put the burden on the creative worker. And the creative worker is going to say, well, hey, I don't have a ton of time or resources to do this myself. And also, why should I have to do this? There's machine learning, but there isn't really machine forgetting. You can't just tell an AI model to disregard something that's been trained on.
In the legal battles taking place, tech companies claim that art that appears on the internet falls under fair use. But many artists don't feel the same way and are grappling with what this technology might mean for the future of their practice.
I started to see generative AI showing up in my Twitter feed April 2022. First, I was intrigued. I didn't feel threatened by it, but I knew that those images could not have been created from nothing. I learned about a database that includes over 5 billion text and data image pairings that are basically like a giant scrape of the internet. Included in that, somewhere in those 5 billion images, are over 50 of my paintings. And because my art is in that data set, somebody can use my name as a prompt and therefore use the data that came from those 50-something paintings. The culmination of my choices, the algorithm determines to create something, quote unquote, in my style. It's like a plagiarism slot machine. So it feels like a betrayal because a lot of artists like myself have careers thanks to putting our art on the internet. And I put my art on the internet in good faith to build following, to build recognition and brand awareness. As an illustrator, I want people to recognize my work and my style and think of me when a project comes along. I would not have the career I have if I had not been putting my art on the internet for 20 years.
The problem we're seeing now is that the generative AI companies have taken a lot of their copyrighted material and used it without consent and without paying for the privilege of using it. AI companies feel like they can get away with just taking all the data on the internet because this has been the practice informally for many years.
Right now, there are a number of active cases targeting different mediums. You have artists suing companies over AI-generated images. There's a case involving generative music and video and also text from chatbots. So it's going to take quite a while for these cases to be resolved. They might also be resolved in slightly different ways, which could lead to different nuances in how things change as far as what companies can and can't do when they're building and training these systems. It's going to take some time.
Tech companies move quickly. The legal system, on the other hand, is slow. Many of the lawsuits against Gen AI companies have been going on for more than 2 years and are expected to go on for at least another 2 years before a ruling. In the meantime, generative AI companies argue their industry is providing creative tools to artists who didn't have them before.
Technology makes something that used to be very hard and expensive and inaccessible and makes it widely accessible to many more people. And so I think we're at the beginning of that change, at the beginning of the moment where people are realizing that they can do what only Hollywood studios and maybe even small amounts of people in the world could do before. A common misconception is that people think that these models are acting as databases. They're not databases, they're creating net new content. That's why the analogy of being a student is so important. You can learn around the world, you can see things on the world, and then use that knowledge to create something completely new. I do think that AI will create a new form of art, a new form of media. And it might be the case that previous art forms might change because of that. And again, this had happened before. The camera changed how painters saw the world. AI will transform how we tell stories. And I think it's less of a gain or loss kind of like discussion and much more about continuous transformation, which I think is the role of art. The role of art is to look around the world, and the role of an artist is to tell a point of view around the world using some sort of a medium or technology to do so. And so I think this is just an evolution of histories and the overall evolution of art.
We do need regulation in a space now where we're drowned out just in a couple of years by synthetic images, synthetic data, music, words, writing. So we have to be able to differentiate what's human made and what isn't, because we also want to know where to put our money. We want to know what's real. We want to know what's fake news and what isn't.
I do think about, where everything is coming from to make these models. And honestly, that's why I always try and make it a point when I'm working with it to make sure I keep it as human as possible with, the things I bring into the workflow when incorporating AI. Just maintaining the humanity within using this stuff is always just important in general when you're creating. Even before AI came along, I think it was always important for me to have some sort of really human touch resonating throughout the work.
What's happening is that by taking the work of artists and not compensating them, AI companies are doing even more to eliminate artists' ability to make a living. And guess what? If you do that, you're not going to have artists anymore. Just like media companies have been starved almost out of existence, and we don't have a thriving journalism economy anymore. And that's bad for democracy. A world without art is not just bad for democracy, that's a world that nobody wants to live in.